From the WNIN Tri-State Public Media Center in downtown Evansville, I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street. Cancer. It's a word and not a sentence. And this message for those in a dark place. You beat cancer by how you live, why you live, and in the manner in which you live. This program celebrates the human spirit, how a positive outlook helps patients and their families deal with the news no one wants to hear. This year, some 2 million Americans will be diagnosed with cancer, turning their lives upside down and wondering how they are going to get through this. My guests are here to help us understand what life is like after a person is diagnosed with cancer. Brad Fisher is a survivor diagnosed with a highly aggressive form of cancer and the author of The Sand Bucket List, his personal journey with lessons for living life and facing death. And joining the conversation is Krista Wilson, Executive Director of Cancer Pathways Midwest in Evansville, where all the support, programs, and other resources are offered free of charge, funded by local grants, donors, and sponsors. So welcome to 2 Main Street. And this message of hope to cancer survivors and their loved ones is very important. Now, Brad, let's start with you. And you are not defined by cancer, are you? Tell us more about Brad Fisher.
Well, sure. Thanks for having me, first of all, and thanks for creating awareness on this important topic. Yeah, I guess I'm many things. I'll start with what I'm most proud. I'm a husband. I'm a father of 2 girls that make me proud and challenge me every day, but are 2 teenagers now. Professionally, I work for a technology company. I think those that know me would say that I'm silly. That would be a way I'm described. But there's a serious side. So I'm a lot of things, and yes, certainly much more than a cancer patient.
And you were a school teacher?
Yes. Yeah. I started off as a high school math teacher, moved into the technology field, and then that's what I now do, work for a technology company that still supports really schools exclusively is the work we do.
You're originally from Ferdinand, Indiana?
I am, yeah.
Okay. And where do you live now, Brad?
It's Brownsburg. It's just on the west side of Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm. All right. How long have you been there?
Danville is also up near Brownsburg. We were there for 15 years, and we've been in Brownsburg for right around 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were diagnosed with an aggressive form of gastric cancer. That was in 2018. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Now, this book, The Sand Bucket List, kind of a notebook of your life and with updates on your treatment throughout the book.
Yeah. The inspiration on it was shortly after my diagnosis. I felt like I had so many lessons I still wanted to teach my 2 daughters at the time. They were 13 and 11. And just felt like there was so much I didn't get to teach them and wanted to teach them. And so, a way to have a voice to their future was to write. And so I started writing, and yet I didn't want to just do a narrative of like my treatment and how I'm feeling, although I did want to capture some of that. I wanted to turn all my experiences, not all my experiences, but many of my life experiences into lessons that they would hopefully learn from. And I chose a lot of stories that are honestly silly or ridiculous stories that
they're silly. There's some silly ones in there. Your first one is interesting.
Yeah,
it's a purse is involved.
Purse. Yeah, right.
Yeah, filled with excrement. I guess that's the best way to put it, right?
That's well
Human
worded.
excrement,
yeah,
or whatever excrement you can find.
Farm animal. We'll call it manure. How's that?
Okay,
That's a safe word here on the radio.
Okay, there we go. Now, the diagnosis: poorly differentiated adenocarcinoma.
Yes.
What were the first symptoms, Brad? And first of all, what is that?
Well, I've learned more what all those words mean, but it's the adenocarcinoma is just a form of cancer. Poorly differentiated, I think, is more as it continues to grow, it becomes less sort of clear on what it is. And so when looking at it under a microscope, it's hard to tell kind of what it is. It's been there for a while. And again, this is my own understanding of it, and it becomes categorized as poorly differentiated. So that's the medical term that was sort of associated with it. My symptoms just started with stomach cramps and other weird symptoms, like I felt like I needed to belch.
Mm-hmm.
Just other weird. I thought I had at first just acid reflux and went on different prescriptions, but it just hung around and wasn't getting better. So more just like this, I call it a dull pain for me because it wasn't like this piercing pain
Mm-hmm.
in my stomach, just this dull pain in my stomach that I then, according to Google, which again, I'm not recommending as your diagnosis here, but I thought I had an ulcer. So I thought I was going in to maybe get treated for an ulcer. Turned out I did not have an ulcer.
Did your wife force you to go to the doctor, or did you do this on your own? Sometimes
That's
the
a valid
spouses.
question. That's a
Yeah.
valid question.
Yeah, it's a total fair question, and I am one that needs encouraged to go in.
Tanya.
Tanya, yeah,
Okay.
Tanya, yeah, and she's definitely the hero in this story. But to the question, I actually think on this one, I decided again. I thought it was an ulcer, and I thought, well, this is silly. I just need to go in and get some meds to, get corrected on the ulcer. Now I needed her to go with me because I was going to be put out for an upper scope endoscopy. So she drove me, but I think both of us saw it as routine going in.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to talk more about Tanya and her role in this in a bit. Krista Wilson, you're the Executive Director of Cancer Pathways Midwest in Evansville. That's the former Gilda's Club on Vogel Road. Your mission to help survivors like Brad and their family members navigate their individual cancer journeys. So before we get into all that, let's learn more about Krista Wilson. How did you get involved in Cancer Pathways?
Well, that's funny. I just talked with Brad about this. I always say it kind of chose me. I overheard a conversation about 20 years ago that colon cancer was preventable. And for some reason in my mind, I felt like I had found the cure for cancer. So I felt like I needed to tell anyone and everyone that would listen. I researched and learned as much as I could. A position was actually created for me through the local colorectal surgeons where I could go out and educate people. Eventually, I took that to a national level, was recruited by a national organization that worked with young adults with colorectal cancer. So I've advocated and connected young adults with colorectal cancer for many years. And then 3 years ago, I decided, I wanted to come back to the local community. I felt like there was a lot of work I could still do here. And so I found the Gilda's Club role that was available and thought this was made for me. So I started in that role almost going on 3 years. And in the meantime, I just kind of switched roles within the organization as other roles became available. And I learned more about our local needs. And my passion has continued to grow. But, growing up, I couldn't have said, hey, I'm going to be this when I grow up. I feel like it chose me. And I've tried to do some other things, but this is where my passion is.
I've read that colorectal cancer is on the increase among younger people.
It is. And I think there's several factors. I think genetics plays a small part, but environment, food, diet. There's a lot of things that play into that, and they say that kids that are around their late 20s, early 30s, they're 4 times at greater risk of developing colorectal cancer than we were at that age. So it is important. We do want to acknowledge that this is happening. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to step down from the national level is I kept going to these conferences and all these medical professionals and researchers kept saying, we don't know why. And it was really hard for me to continue to spend the money to go to these conferences and fly these professionals in and for them to tell us they didn't know. Meanwhile, I'm, comforting these families who are losing their family members in their 20s and their 30s and these young moms and dads. I wanted to do more. That wasn't enough for me anymore. So I'm still very passionate about the colorectal cancer prevention and awareness. That'll always be kind of my first love, basically just because I know more about I know more about it. So I feel more
originally
comfortable.
from this area?
I am. So born and raised here. I've traveled a lot. I had great opportunities when I worked on a national level, but again, just very passionate about our community and supporting our loved ones here.
Now, Cancer Pathways Midwest, you have a lot of partners I know involved,
Yes.
and because that's how you operate.
Yes.
So, who are you partnered with?
So I was telling Brad again this morning that we can only do so much. We can't do everything. And anyone who's been impacted by cancer knows that there are so many things that go along with that. Not only just the physical treatment side of it, but there's this whole gamut of mental and emotional pieces that go with it. You're navigating insurance. You may be navigating Social Security or disability. You're navigating new roles that your family is thrown into. You're worried about whether you're making the right treatment decision. You're worried about keeping some normalcy with your family and friends, whether you can work. There's a whole gamut. So what we do really well at Cancer Pathways is we provide that mental and emotional support to help navigate those things. So we provide the help to navigate, helping them find financial resources, educating them on specific treatment and side effects topics, or fertility, or ways that their family can cope together and continue to communicate. And that's something that's very specific to us that no one else in this area can provide. We have licensed mental health professionals on staff that provide that, more than just support groups that, everyone thinks support is sit around, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, but there's so much more to that. Learning coping mechanisms. We have an art studio. So we have individualized support that can help each family individually. So I'm not sure if I answered that question. So
And the thing is, all of this is free of charge.
all of it is free of charge.
And I think people should realize that. They shouldn't be intimidated by going in there and say, well, how much is this going to cost me?
Correct. We don't file insurance. We don't even ask you for your insurance card. We are locally funded by people in the community, local donors and sponsors. We receive a few grants, but everything is funded by the community, which speaks volumes. If only we could create enough awareness for everyone to know who we are and what we do, even if you're not impacted directly. I feel like you have the golden ticket of if someone around you is impacted, you could then say, I know how to help you get the help that you need, you and your family, and it doesn't cost anything.
So, Brad Fisher, what do you think about Cancer Pathways Midwest?
Oh, wow. I had the pleasure of just being there this morning, and Krista showed me around, and I was just saying, wow, what a resource for this community. I was so impressed with not only all the work they're doing, but their team. You can just sort of see in their eyes their purpose. I wish I had something like this, not even for myself, but Chris and I were talking earlier. I feel like even our own family of 4, we all cope differently, and so certainly 2 different daughters of teenage age, and then my wife. I feel like we would have all benefited from everything, from the emotional side, but honestly, all the practical stuff that she talked about, navigating some of just knowing who to contact when you're having trouble with insurance and having somebody to sort of help you find the next step forward.
Now, was it therapeutic for you to write this book, The Sand Bucket List?
Yeah, surprisingly, I kept telling myself I'm writing this for my daughters in the beginning, I'm writing this for my daughters, but the more I kept writing, there was a moment where I'm like, all right, who am I kidding? And maybe I'm the one, benefiting from this, because I felt like it really helped me wrestle with what I was feeling, and not just physically, but like emotionally, and make sense of both who I am and who I want to be. And first it was writing about the emotions from cancer in particular.
Was this a blog you started?
Yeah, it started as a blog. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and it really was just created from the sense of urgency. Is I never dreamt, honestly, I would have the time to finish it. Like just to be candid, and I don't mean time in my day. I mean time on the earth, if you will. So I just felt like, well, I'm just going to put it out there, and suddenly all those filters of being embarrassed, sort of didn't feel all that significant. And so it was just a way to try to capture what was in my head and my heart to leave with them. Mm-hmm. However, it did evolve, even in terms of my audience in my own head, because certainly as I was getting treatment, I would see just the pain, the anguish on all the different families going through infusion, and I always feel like I could identify the person that there was the first time, and there's all these sort of emotions you would be blind to if you you didn't happen to see the pain it's causing so many. So I think part I started to write for them as well.
What about the title, The Sand Bucket List? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, so the one of the practical issues I wrestled with, actually still wrestle with, and actually we probably should all wrestle with, is simply like, where do you spend your time? I feel like it's the most important decision and the most difficult decision to make every day. And so early on, when I didn't think my time here would be that long, it was, where do I spend my time? And I would talk to close people, and we talked about the idea of a bucket list, right? And this idea of putting together a few things I want to be sure to do in the next year that I've never been able to do. And so that list started to form, and it was the things that I like doing, by the way, like traveling and doing adventurous things. And yet there was, what I was clinging to was just normalcy. So I would just wanted a normal day. And so I write about this in the book, but that there was a moment when after I was on treatment, I was actually feeling better. Some of us went to Florida on vacation, and we were literally on the beach digging a hole and filling the hole with sand at the end of each day. But it was also like, what am I doing? I was sort of wrestling with, why am I doing this? But it also became like, to me, like a defining way of what I value. And in the end, I realized it's not like so much where I'm going or the big trip. It's sort of why I'm doing it, who's doing it with me. And that became then my sort of view of life, I guess, was that it's not about a bucket list that you do once in your life and you check off. It's about filling your life with a few ingredients. So the analogy here is a sand bucket that creates a sand castle, that you pack it with a few ingredients, sand and water. In the case of life, it's broken into sections of love, learn, and laugh. Yeah.
Well, you talk about living in the moment. I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah,
where
yeah.
I got from the book, and the simple joy of doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Just normal chores. Hey, I'm
Yeah.
doing this. This is what I'm doing right now. I'm enjoying myself. Well, we're talking to Brad Fisher, cancer survivor, about his personal journey in his book, The Sand Bucket List. And Krista Wilson is here. She's executive director of Cancer Pathways Midwest, the former Gilda's Club in Evansville. And Krista, the club itself is designed to be an oasis of sorts, it's a calming atmosphere. Would you agree?
I would totally agree. We've worked very hard to have it that way when people walk through the door. I know it's a big, it takes a lot of courage to walk through that door for people. I think once they walk through the door, they're no longer being talked at about their cancer. They have to articulate it. They have to talk about it. So like as Brad mentioned, he wanted to talk or call cancer cat sores. So he didn't have to say the word. And we have a lot of families that feel that way, that once they have to say it out loud, it makes it real. So when people walk through that door, they're very surprised of how welcoming and comforting it is, and not sad. I think a lot of times people think they're going to walk through this door and there's going to be people crying and sad, and we're a community. We're a community where we get it. People look like you. They've been through treatments like you. They understand what you're feeling. If you're tired a year after treatment, we get it. So it's just a welcoming community that you can be a part of, and you don't have to explain yourself. It's very validating.
When I took a tour, the building itself is very inviting. It doesn't look very sterile or clinical at all.
No, not
it's
at
like
all.
kind of a cottage.
Yes. We always joke that this is their clubhouse. That they can come and they can hang out. There's social opportunities there. There's educational opportunities, nutrition. And like I said, we have people that sometimes they just come in on their lunch hour because they don't want to go out somewhere. They know they can come to the clubhouse and hang out and have that validation. And sometimes that's all they need, is just to know that there's somebody else out there that's like them and who understands what they're going through.
So, Brad, I understand you were 46 years old in good health when you were diagnosed with this aggressive form of gastric cancer. And so how are you feeling now?
I feel great.
You look great.
Well, thank you. I've been very fortunate. It's been a journey. I'm still being closely monitored. Should say that. I had a recent scan end of February, and was largely, I think, good news, but still seeing some things on the scans, and we'll have another one in May. So prognosis, I've learned I don't know how to talk about that always, but yeah, I always just answer how I feel, and I'm so fortunate. I feel fantastic.
And the diagnosis was in 2018.
The original one, yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
again, there's been sort of multiple things along the journey, but yes.
But so far, so good.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's good.
yeah.
Now, let me ask you some frequently asked questions of those people who are newly diagnosed with cancer, the so-called next steps. So the first question, Brad, did you ask, why me?
You know, it's funny because, again, this is looking back at my writing, and I realized, yeah, I guess I did, because I saw, I can read now like some of that in my writing. But I think it was more why my family. I think at the diagnosis, I don't know that I did feel personally, because I'm always like, why anyone? Like, really? But I certainly felt that, honestly, surprisingly more when I started to get some good news where the treatment was working for me, and I was very keenly aware it was not working for everyone. So that then hung on me, and still hangs on me. Is why me? Like, why do I get the benefit of it, and why not everybody else?
Is that a survival guilt thing, you think?
Yeah, well, I'm sure it is. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even recognize it at the time, but excuse me. But yeah, it's a real thing. I realized it's.
Well, I see you're very emotional about that.
Yeah, it's a very real thing.
Mhm.
Yes. Yep.
Now, okay,
Absolutely.
another one here. What do I tell my loved ones? I'm sure that was a tough one.
Well, that was a very practical question, right after the diagnosis that I felt like we had to sort of wrestle with. And again, our daughters were 13 and 11, and I'm sure it depends on the age. And I don't want to act like I have the answer on how one should do it. The way we navigated it was really being pretty honest, even at that age. But there was still so much we just did not know. And I think that's the honest answer, is like, we could say, here's what we know. I've been diagnosed. But then that generates a million questions. Does this mean X, Y, Z? And the answer to most of those are, we don't know. Like, we don't know. And that's the honesty of it. So that's how we talked about it with our two daughters.
How did they react?
That was a hard day. But I think they're remarkable in that they.
So they were old enough to understand.
Oh yeah, I think so, and probably a little bit different even between the two, the 13-year-old versus the 11-year-old. 13-year-old's Anna Mae, and 11-year-old is in the book I called her Lizzie. We now call her Liz mostly, but even between the two, and not necessarily because of age, but even personalities, Anna Mae was much more, I don't really want to hear about it, particularly like any of the medical. She and it sort of had that conversation. What do you want to know? And she was pretty clear earlier on. I don't want to know about any of the medical stuff. Whereas Liz would ask more questions and wanted to know more. But they were amazing, I think.
Now, another question here. How am I going to work and pay for medical costs?
Yeah, I get that question. Yeah, I mean, I totally get it. It's like, that's a real practical. Yeah, again, there's so many things I'm fortunate about, but one of the things is that I have felt pretty well through this, and then I also work for an employer that's been very flexible and allowed me to work when I could, but then also if I had tough days to not work. I work from home, which I think certainly helped in my situation. But yeah, I wish I had the answer, because that is a real challenge. I think the most pressing practical question I think a lot of people probably face. I took it just one day at a time. Like if I can work today, I want to work today. If I can work tomorrow, I wanted to stay active again. I wanted to cling to normalcy.
Sure.
But I mean, I literally even start taking, consistently my laptop to infusion to treatment, and would work. I'd do video calls like with, nobody would even know that I'm hooked up to getting chemo at the time or immunotherapy later.
Mm-hmm. Now, the final one here, how am I going to get through this? And I think I kind of have a good answer to that for you because I know you've written this book and you have a great attitude.
Well, yeah, but I'm always like...
You have some down days, though, I'm sure.
Well, no, I mean, I do take pride in myself being a very positive person. The only reason I pause there is, I have such a heavy heart for, again, those that face a different fate, and I don't want people to misunderstand it as like, oh, they just weren't positive enough. Like, it's not that simple. Mm-hmm. So I think the way I would respond is like, how are you going to get through this? What I would say now, being in a little better situation health-wise, is first of all, you have probably no idea how strong you are, that what you're capable of dealing with. But second, and probably even more important, is you don't have to do this alone. And this is like thinking about Krista's and the cancer group that she helps lead. There are resources out there.
Well, I think that leads me right into Krista Wilson at Cancer Pathways. I think that's the message you give to people when they come through the doors, is that you are not alone in this journey.
Yes. Most people, when they're first diagnosed or their loved one is first diagnosed, they're so overwhelmed. They don't know what they need. They can't possibly fathom one more thing that they need to do. They're just trying to navigate this news. And I think for us to be there and say, you're not alone. You're not the only one this is happening to. Your situation is very individualized, but we can help you navigate that. So we work very integratedly with the hospitals. They refer families to us, and people can walk through the door. They can give us a call. But any type of diagnosis, or whether they're a caregiver, or even if they've lost a loved one to cancer, we still can help them navigate that grief journey. So many resources that we offer, so much support that I just want to help our community understand that is available to them, all at no cost.
Now, you deal with all ages at Cancer Pathways, and I know in your brochure you have a picture of the twins, Parker and Spencer. Tell me about them.
Yes. So obviously, Evansville doesn't have a pediatric oncology unit, so most of our pediatric families have to travel north to Indy, to Peyton Manning or Riley, or to Louisville to Norton Children's Hospital. But when those families are at home, and a lot of times they're divided, maybe one parent has to go with the child to treatment, the other parent has to stay home, take care of the other kids and work. We want to provide those families with support and navigation as well. So we do have licensed mental health professionals that are trained to help you to talk with your kids and tell them what's going on, and give them opportunities of how they can still help, that maybe their parents' looks are going to change through treatment, or maybe their own looks, if they're personally diagnosed, are going to change. So we can help them navigate that. But Parker and Spencer, they are twin boys, and Parker was diagnosed at 8 with a brain tumor. And they were in the same class at school. They go to a rural school, and Spencer wanted to talk about it, and Parker did not. He didn't want to be the cancer kid at school. And so our team worked with their team, with their treatment team, and we work with their school, and we help them to navigate that, of how, Parker's being circled by this treatment team, and there are people taking care of him per se, and their parents do a great job of getting them the support that they need. They both come and do different therapies at the clubhouse, and then Spencer, we've been able to provide him with that support as well, so he doesn't feel like it's just Parker that's getting the help. We can help the entire family.
Another person here you got on the brochure, Nick.
Yes.
He was 25 years old, melanoma.
Yes, skin melanoma.
Skin cancer, of course, that's the most common form of cancer.
Yes.
It's diagnosed.
Nick is a huge advocate of ours. He and also Parker and Spencer, they're our ambassadors. So we started an ambassador program, and this program allows survivors, caregivers, or volunteers to apply and share their story with our community. So what we do is we take a day and we pamper them. We have a photographer, a hair and makeup artist, a videographer. They all donate their time and their talents. And we pamper these volunteers and survivors and caregivers, and we allow them to tell their story. We capture their story through pictures and through their videos. Again, this is not only therapeutic for them to tell their story, but it's also very empowering and very educating for our community to learn what they're going through, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally through that cancer diagnosis, what it's like losing a family member due to that, what it's like caregiving for someone or trying to go back to work or have a family. There's a lot of things that go through your head, and a lot of those were the frequently asked questions that you have. How am I going to work and afford this? Is my spouse still going to be attracted to me? Can I have children? Am I going to survive? There's all kinds of questions that they're mulling around in their minds all the time that it's unseen. It's very different from seeing the bag of chemo hanging from the pole. That's very visual, but there's so many things that are underlying that they can't see. So Nick is a big advocate. He is one of our ambassadors that goes out and kind of tells his story. Unfortunately, Nick, he's doing well. His mother was recently diagnosed with triple-negative breast cancer, so he is now turned in from a patient to a caregiver. And so, again, just a family that is going through so much and just helping them to navigate those pieces. It can be overwhelming.
Well, I know I looked at your calendar of events. You have a lot going on at Cancer Pathways Midwest. You have all kinds of activities. You got a Survivor Day. You have food trucks. A lot going on there. So there's a lot of positive things going on.
Yeah. Fortunately, we do have some collaborators in the community, which I think you asked me about earlier. We do partner with the hospitals. We partner with a lot of community organizations. Wesselman Woods, they provide us with opportunities to do counseling and therapy in nature. We partner with the YMCA. They allow our wellness instructors, like our Tai Chi and our yoga instructors, to use space at the YMCA so that our members can go there and do those classes for free. We partner with Ascension and their wellness center to provide yoga. So anytime that we can partner with anyone in the community so that we're not duplicating efforts, that's a win-win for us. And it also shows our families who are impacted by cancer that they have community support, that they're not alone. So it's just another validation that we're doing this together.
Now, these other book signing events you've attended, what are some of the questions people have for you, or what stories have you heard from them?
Yeah, well, I'll take the second question there. What stories have I heard from them? I sort of paused because I am both touched by this and saddened, I guess, both that how many people are living with this in their life, either because they directly are a patient or somebody in their family does. I'm sitting here thinking in my head, and I can think of seriously, probably a dozen different people who I still stay in contact regularly with, who some who I knew before the book, and some actually surprising many that I did not know before the book, but the book spoke to them, and so they sort of reached out and then shared sort of what they were going through, and I don't pretend to have all the answers or even most of the answers, but I'm always willing to share what I've learned through the process.
Now, your medical treatment, I understand, I think I read where Tanya's sister worked with a Dr. Rex and got you involved with some kind of special treatments. What's that all about?
Yeah. So, and that's really just another way of saying I'm a lucky guy. But yeah, yeah. So I have
Tanya's your wife.
Tanya's my wife. Yeah, yeah. Tanya's my wife. Dr. Rex, I guess, just to go through some of the names, is my gastroenterologist, who was the original one that diagnosed it and found the cancer in my stomach.
This is at IU Health?
Yeah, IU Health in Indianapolis,
Okay.
University Hospital. Yeah, and I don't think I'm exaggerating when I'd say he's like internationally well known, respected. He is a very respected person in the field.
No, I don't want to just call him Dr. Rex. He has a full name.
Right. Well, that also becomes the story. Is I sort of playfully, he doesn't even know this, so is like I play off the T-Rex. And that's but anyway, Dr. Rex. No, that's I think that's a fair. It's Douglas Rex is
Okay.
his first name. But yeah, he is fantastic. But I was lucky that Tanya's sister, her name's Jenny, so my sister-in-law. Worked at the time for Dr. Rex, and I don't want to make it sound like it's all who you know, but in this case, it certainly probably helped. Not necessarily because I think he sees all kinds of patients without connections, but it just helped me, develop that trust quickly. And could not say enough about him, but honestly, all the team of doctors I've had, particularly, I have to give a quick shout out to my oncologist, Dr. Paul Helf, has just been. He's an amazing doctor, amazing human. So.
Now, you have received all your cancer treatment up in Indianapolis. Is that correct?
I have, yep.
Have you been satisfied with your treatment?
Yeah, again, I'm the luckiest guy there is because, just to go through the path a little bit, as I started on chemo, there were certainly days of that were hard, but they, really helped me tolerate it the best I could, and then switched to immunotherapy, and that was, again, Dr. Helf. I could talk the next hour about him, but, he helped with all the practical things, even appealing with insurance to get it covered because it was not being covered by insurance, and my options were running low before I switched to that, and that I think became my saving grace was immunotherapy, being able to go to that, and both in terms of the reaction I had to it, meaning that I had a positive response to it, but also it was easier to tolerate. Now again, it's not a silver bullet; it doesn't work for all people, for all patients, but I've been very happy with my treatment.
Krista Wilson is the Executive Director of Cancer Pathways. So what are some of the common questions you hear, Krista, when folks come through the front door?
A lot of times we don't get a lot of questions. It's more of I don't know what I need. I don't know what to do.
Okay.
So that's where we kind of...
They're overwhelmed.
They're overwhelmed. They've never done this before. And if it's a caregiver coming in, obviously they feel like they have even less control than the person diagnosed. There's a loss of control when you receive a diagnosis and things are happening so fast. You feel like you don't get to process. It's kind of like, when you're thinking about buying a car, you have the time to say, okay, I'm going to research the safety, the gas mileage, how much does it cost to get this repaired? If you get a cancer diagnosis, you don't always have that opportunity to research and feel comfortable with the treatment. It's basically someone saying, this is what you need to do. This is when we're going to do it. And here's when you need to be there. And that's what it feels like. It's a huge loss of control. You don't know if you're making the right decision. You've just met this oncologist most of the time. And then, you pass that on to the next, the caregiver, where they're not even sitting in the hot seat, but they're like, I've just, gave my loved one into the treatment of this professional that I don't know. I haven't had time to research this. I don't know how I feel. I don't know how they feel. It is a big ball of fire. So I think when they come through the door, a lot of times they don't yet have questions. They're overwhelmed and they don't know what to do. So that's where we kind of step in and we kind of say, breathe. And then we listen, and then we kind of figure out, okay, here's the resources, here's where we can navigate you to. We got this. You don't have to do this all by yourself. And I think that's very comforting for those families.
Well, it is a cliche. It does take a village. And I know you have a great staff that we talked about, some of the members of your staff. You also have this very unique program called Melanated Support.
We
Tell me about
do.
that.
So we know that people of color, a lot of times they're diagnosed with cancer a little bit earlier. They may not know their risk. And also, a lot of times they have trouble trusting medical professionals because, for example, a person of color could go in and say, hey, I have this rash on my skin. If we have a local physician that is not used to seeing people of color and their skin conditions, they may say, oh, that's just a rash, put some topical on it. I'll see you in 3 months. Where someone who is used to seeing people of color, knowing their skin conditions, may say, we need to take a look at that now. So it's things like that. Also, access to medical care is a little bit different. So we wanted to provide a space where they could come and talk about these obstacles that they face. How can they overcome them and help them navigate and direct them to those specific resources.
Janice Lewis?
Yes. So she is one of our fabulous support specialists. She is a master's of social work, and we have licensed mental health counselors and 2 board-certified art therapists there as well. We have several contracted facilitators that are social workers that also help. So we have such a great team that is so passionate about what we do and really care about the families that walk through our door. And because of their passion, they really keep up to date on how to provide the best resources to these families. So I am so proud to walk through those doors and to showcase our team and the clubhouse. And we have our founders, Ann and Randy Moore, and all those founders and Capital Campaign participants that brought this here, brought Gilda's Club to Evansville, and it's such an amazing resource.
And Krista, when I called you about appearing with Brad, you told me you were reading his book. So, as you can see by the book, each cancer journey is certainly unique, isn't it?
Yes. So it was just ironic when you called me, and I was telling Brad this morning that you were explaining to me who he was, and I was so excited on the other end of the phone. I was like, I just need to tell him I know who he is, and I'm reading his book, and I cannot wait to meet him. So
that was good for me too. I went, yes, score.
Yes,
this is wonderful.
Yes. And I'm not finished yet with the book. I'm almost there. So I told him no spoilers. So I might have to close my ears at some point. But the book, I told him, is great on a couple of different levels. One, it really, in him sharing his story, not only was it therapeutic for him, but it's very validating for others who are going through that journey. But I also think it's very educating for those who haven't been impacted directly to maybe think about some of the things that, again, what I mentioned earlier, seeing someone lose with no hair, that's very visual. Seeing someone at chemo, with the bag hanging on the pole, that's very visual. Or seeing them be weak and not be able to weak, that's visual. But not knowing what's going on in their head, and just because they've rang the bell, it doesn't mean that everything's back to normal. It doesn't mean they're going to be their old self again. There's a new self. There's a new normal, and this book helps educate about that. So even people who haven't been impacted directly can appreciate the different paths and journeys that they have to go through during a cancer diagnosis, whether you're the one diagnosed or the caregiver or lost a loved one.
Well, I found some interesting statistics here on cancer. In the U.S., it's estimated that nearly 2 million people will be diagnosed with cancer this year, and there will be over 610,000 cancer deaths expected this year, and that's about 1,600 cancer deaths a day. But then again, there's been a lot of progress in the treatment of cancer, and I think the decline in cancer deaths I found was 33% declined from 1991 to 2020. So there's been great progress in lung, colorectal, breast, and prostate cancer. So some good news, definitely.
There is, and I know a lot of people, like you mentioned earlier, you have your bad days. You can be positive only so much, but even those of us who aren't in the thick of it right now, we have our bad days too. So they're allowed their bad days, and we just think that when you come together as a community and you can validate that it's not a happy, smiley. You don't have to entertain people all the time. It's okay for you to not feel okay. And there have been advancements in medical technology. And so we tell people on those bad days, if you're still willing to try different things, if that's in you to do that, we encourage you to do that, because something might be right around the corner, like an immunotherapy or a clinical trial, that might be a good fit for you. Things are changing in the medical field and oncology every day, so we do encourage that, but we also have to help families navigate when their loved one has accepted that treatment is no longer for them and that they're done. They want to just live out the rest of their life the best that they can and focus on spending time with their families. And sometimes that's really hard for friends and family to accept and to understand. So we help families to navigate that. So while there has been great medical advancements, at some point we have to love and respect that person's wish of whether they want to continue with treatment or not.
So that becomes the new normal.
Yes.
And that's a tough sell for a lot of people, isn't it, Brad?
Yeah, although I certainly have evolved in my own thinking of, life and death. I like to be candid, and, not my book, but a book I read, Being Mortal, was, I thought, a fabulous book. Again, not my book, but I would recommend it for anyone. But I think it just is a very candid, walk through that we're all ultimately dying. So this isn't just for cancer patients. We're all ultimately dying. And so having a clear head of, like, what do we want that to look like and what are our wishes? And I think if you start to make it part of your thoughts and part of your conversation, it's actually not as scary. It doesn't have to be as scary as I think maybe our society sort of makes it, is that there is some peace in coming to terms with what we all know is the ultimate, fate of all of us.
So your sand bucket list, how's that coming along?
Well, it's been totally surprising. It's sort of taken on a life of its own, to be candid. I'm always quick to say that, I know a lot of it has nothing to do with the quality of my writing and the quality of people in my life that have supported me and just been so kind and supportive of not only reading it, but then recommending it. But yeah, I hope it does help, not just for cancer patients, but I love the person who reads it, who has no cancer in their life, who honestly doesn't even really want to learn about it. And again, I respect, probably would be that person, but that read it and say, I love it just because I laughed, and if nothing else, hopefully we all could use some laughter in our lives. So it's not a gloom and doom.
No, it's not.
It's
No, it's
not.
not. No, it's not at all.
But yeah, it's been surprising.
A lot of silliness in there, Brad. Living up to your reputation.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'll take that badge. But yeah, no, it's been really surprising, because I got into this really initially just when I started writing 2 copies for my daughters, and but I am glad it's speaking to others.
Well, you kind of remind me of Scott Solomon, who's also a rather silly guy. I know you're going to help him out with this Will Read and Sing concert, raising money for a good cause. So, and he is also a silly writer, but very entertaining.
Yeah, I did not know Scott when I had written this book, and he read my book and reached out to me, and has since got to know him, and yeah, he is hilarious both in his writing and in person.
Well, he recommended your book to me.
Oh, well,
so
thank
Scott,
you, Scott. Thank you,
Scott
Scott.
did that. Definitely. So, what do you still want to do? Brad Fisher.
Oh my.
Dishes. He wants to do dishes.
Oh, well, that's
Daily
that's
chores.
good.
He wrote
That's
about
good.
it.
Yeah, truly I hold to that. I don't know that I have a checklist of before I do die, I want to do these things. I think it's more the state of mind and the state of being that I want to have each and every day. Now, I certainly keep hoping there's some good that comes from this, both in so many different ways. Like, so I hope what they've learned from my treatment, that, whether things go good or poorly, that benefits the next patient. So I don't have, again, an agenda of like, how can I help? But I certainly want to help. I feel compelled to help those who are struggling and those who are suffering.
Okay, Krista Wilson, a final message to our listeners and viewers about Cancer Pathways Midwest. It's a great resource, and more people need to know about it.
Absolutely. So just walk through the door, or you can have your physician refer you. Again, there's no cost. We have several different opportunities for education, support, nutrition, wellness. Like you mentioned, the commercial kitchen that we have that is in memory of Ann Moore. We use that kitchen for nutrition demos where you can get in there and get hands-on chopping vegetables. We have garden off to the side. We kind of teach you how to cook for those changing palates, how to cook for your loved one who may not be able to enjoy your meatloaf that you've fixed them for the last 40 years, but it's a good way for the family to learn how to adapt into their new normal. We have an art studio, like I mentioned, that is open studio hours, but also you can reserve that time for individuals or families. So just a lot of non-traditional therapies that they can take part in to kind of help with that coping, that communication, and again, so that you're not alone. We have a community for you. Just walk through the door. It's all free of charge.
Brad Fisher and Krista Wilson, thanks for being my guests on 2 Main Street. I want to end with this inspirational quote. I think it sums up what both of you have shared with us. Your life is a story. Write well and edit often. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control the way you handle it. What do you want your story to say? And always remember, cancer is a word and not a sentence, right? Okay, thanks, guys. I'm David James, and this is 2 Main Street.